That was awesome. Thank you. We lost electricity in the middle of the night, and so I shaved via the flashlight on my iPhone because that is that's pretty primitive, isn't it? Yeah. And I got here very early because I still had work to do on my talk, and there was no electricity and no coffee, so I had to leave the house. And it was just interesting as I was thinking about life and the things that we take for granted, the things that we conform to, even when we aren't aware that that's exactly what we're doing, was we're conforming. And all this week, actually for the last month, I have 2 more chapters left in my next book to complete. And for whatever reason, I am just dragging. One chapter is on hell. And so it's been hell trying to get and articulate what it is, which course of direction, what avenue of thought do I want to express about this idea of hell. And so I was remembering last year, right around this time, actually in August, Ty met me in Paris. Don't you love saying things like that? Ty met me in Paris. And we went to the Louvre. And so what we did, we thought we were very travel savvy. And I shared a little bit of this with you. But we thought we were really travel savvy because we booked an evening tour online. And that way you get to miss all of the long lines, and you go into a little secret door, and there's your tour guide. And we started the Louvre tour at 6:30, and still at 6:30 p.m. it was packed, just massively packed. And the funny thing about this was I observed that people were obsessed with only 3 items, 3 art pieces to look at. There was the Winged Victory, there was Venus de Milo, and there was the Mona Lisa. And it was as if nothing else in the Louvre existed. It was really fascinating to watch cattle consciousness, as I call it. They're just moving along, moving along, and not really absorbing and taking in any of the other things. And the pinnacle, of course, is you get to the final wing, where right smack dab in this wing, there's sort of a floating wall, and that separates the wing, and that's where the Mona Lisa hangs, and it's behind glass. And as you walk in, it's just massive crowds, and they're all pushing and pushing and wanting to take pictures and selfies of themselves and Mona. And I thought, am I the only one? Because as I'm standing in the midst of this crowd, even late at night, I'm thinking, look at all these other paintings in this wing. And I thought, what must these other paintings feel? Because it's as if they were non-existent. Do you see what I mean? That wasn't the only painting in this enormous wing. The walls were covered, but everybody was just fixated on this one thing, on this one piece of art. And so the inner inquirer within me wanted to know why. I wanted to know why. Why the Mona Lisa and not something else? Why was everyone so fixated? Why was everyone bypassing all of the rest of the art just to get a snap of this? Because everyone else says so, or because the books tell us, or because for whatever reason that no one can really explain, it has become the most parodied, the most talked about, the most famous painting that exists in the world. And I'm going, why? Why? And no one can really answer why, because none of us can go back in time and notate specific dates and reasons as to how this happened. It just through the tipping point of mass consciousness took place, and that's the way that it is. But does that mean that it is above all better than any of the other paintings that exist in the Louvre? And so I love having an inner inquirer. I love having something within me that wants to know the deeper why to what's going on around me. I want to know, why should I do something just because everybody else is doing it? I want to know why. Why is this valuable? Just because you say that it's valuable, is it valuable to me? And what I love about the science of mind philosophy is the ability to honor that within ourselves. There are many wise sages and teachers that have gone before us that have said, if something doesn't resonate with you, throw it out. If this doesn't feel right, if this doesn't vibrate within your own heart and within your own mind, you have the freedom. You have the ability, the awareness to keep what does work for you and to discard the rest. But the beautiful thing is in discarding the rest, don't make the rest wrong. But just keep that thing which holds true for you. So I'm wondering where our inner inquirer is. I'm wondering what kind of relationship do we have with it? Do we honor it? If you were like me, you were probably an inner inquirer as a child. And I generated a lot of upset at First Assemblies of God in Beaumont, Texas during Sunday school when I was a kid. Because I wanted to know why Abraham's wife, Sarah, could have a child at 90 years of age when my older sister told me that older women can't have babies anymore. I wanted to know, why should I get a haircut if Samson got one and look what happened to him? I wanted to know why Jonah was the only documented person to survive inside the belly of a whale. And how did he do it without food, oxygen, water? How did he do that? I wanted in-depth analysis and explanation of every biblical story and an answer for why these circumstances and perceived miracles were not relatable to the world around me. For example, I wanted to know why I'm supposed to memorize the 23rd Psalm. I'm supposed to know, why do I have to memorize the Golden Rule? Why am I supposed to memorize the Ten Commandments when I don't see these things being lived out, being relatable amongst the people around me? What's the point? And so the inner inquirer within me is not only taking information, but it's coalescing that with this greater why so that it can have meaning for me. And so I ask the same thing of us. What is our inner inquirer doing with the information that we hear on a regular basis, the stuff that we share with one another, the diving deep that we have on a personal level? What does that do? How does that resonate with our why? And why do we hold on to that? The only answer that I was ever given in my Christian upbringing that I was to believe without question, because it was written in the Bible, and the Bible is the infallible Word of God. If I ever strayed beyond those permissive lines, it was deemed unacceptable, and I was swiftly reprimanded. I can't tell you how many times my mother was called in to my Sunday school class. Yet to question everything is not only healthy, it is an inherent part of human behavior. Curiosity, the wonder behind the why, drives our seeking nature to take action. It is the only thing that can effectively scratch the itch of our perpetual longings. Yes, I wrote that this week. I was very proud of that sentence. So Socrates taught us that wonder is the beginning of wisdom. Wonder is the beginning of wisdom. And didn't you love the way you had this sense of wonderment as a child? In fact, whenever that word is used, usually the adjective childlike is put before the word wonder, to have childlike wonder. Why did it become reserved for just that? And when did we lose that? And so we start to look at life. We start to look at the parables. We start to look at the metaphors that ask us to dive deeper, to question why, to look at why we stagnate, to look at why we've stopped being willing to grow, to look at what our fears are and not to judge them for us, but to look at them as lessons and to say, obviously this fear is here because at some point in my life I inhaled and I held that in, my very DNA, my spiritual DNA, my physical DNA, and I was not willing to return to that. But returning to that gives to us some sense of lesson. And so if we don't return to the fear to be able to master the fear, to see the fear as simply illusion, then what we become is like that cattle consciousness that just continues to move and to go and to revere things only because the rest of the world is doing it. And so where is your individuality? Where is your individuality? Where is your sense of wonder? Where is your sense of crossing the boundaries of what is permissible in order to honor the callings of your heart? I came across this wonderful parable. It starts out with the word behold. I like that word. I think that's Sanskrit for pay attention. Behold, at the time of harvest, the ears of corn did bring forth kernels, which were dried and prepared for the popper's hand. And then it was that the popper did take the kernels, all that did appear alike unto him, and he applied the oil and the heat. And it came to pass that when the heat was on, some did explode with great promise, and did magnify themselves 100-fold. And some did burst forth with fluffiness, which did both gladden the eye and satisfy the taste of the popper. And likewise, some did pop, but not too much. But lo, there were some that did just lie there. And even though the popper's heat was alike unto all, they did bask in the oil, and they kept everything that they had for themselves. And so it came to pass that those which had given of themselves did bring forth much joy and delight to many munchers. But those which kept of the warmth and did not bring forth were only cast into the pail and thought of with hardness and disgust. And thus we see that in the beginning, all appear alike. But when the heat is on, some come forth and give their all, while others fail to pop and thus become discarded and forgotten. Thus the parable of the popcorn. So is that about choice and accountability? Is it about to pop or not to pop? That is the question. What is that about? And I think many times when you look at this, it's sort of a modern day version of the sower and the seeds in the Bible. But I want to take it differently, because I don't want to address the people who don't pop. I don't want to address the kernels of us that just lie there and ignore all of the opportunity that is there, because I don't think that's who you are. What I want to address are the ones that did pop, but not too much. Because that's where I think mass consciousness is. The ones that popped, but not too much. Popping meaning we get up in the morning and we do our business and we take care of our families and we try to be honorable people. And we earn a wage, and we try to contribute to society, and we just want to fit in. And yet, underneath all of that, there is still a deep vacuum, a deep sense of not belonging, a deep sense of shame, a deep sense of futility that actually runs beneath all of that, that keeps us from bursting forth, from popping into greater and greater experiences. And see, the beautiful thing about having an inner inquirer is that inner inquirer challenges that. And it does not let you stay in that place of smallness. And so when you look around you in the room this morning, every single one of you has a story of thriving, a story of struggle, a story of victory, a story of defeat, a story of managing, a story of thriving, a story of all kinds of parallels of what life brings to us. But what have we gleaned from that? And see, what we're taught is, how do we not just bounce back and forth unconsciously at random like cattle consciousness, walking through the museum of life and doing what everybody else is doing? But where do you actually stop and say, wait a minute, not only was this good, but my life is actually designed for great. My life is designed for excellence. My life is designed for genius. And where have I accepted the fact that I'm not qualified for that? So this is the category, this popping but not too much. This is the category I find most of us visiting and revisiting, swearing to leave and never return, and then returning. And so what do we do? How do we incorporate a sense of mindfulness within our lives? And that's what it's really about. So I can't tell you enough about how powerful the moment is. Because it is in the moment where you realize that we are we're just doing what everybody else is doing. It is the moment where you realize that you've been just existing. It is that moment where you realize that there's something better for you. It's in that moment that the power lies. It's the moment is like that popcorn kernel. And it says, what are you going to do with this? Are you going to practice same old, same old? Are you going to be willing to elevate yourself in such a way that you're not going to repeat the patterns of the past? You're not going to repeat the patterns of the way in which your parents did it. You're not going to repeat the patterns that everyone in your circle of influence has done. But you're going to allow yourself to pop full out, regardless of what they're going to say. You're going to allow yourself to pop regardless of what a spreadsheet says. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't pop so big because that's dangerous. That's being impetuous. How can you leave? How can you leave that corporate kernel for a pop experience that has no validity and no track record and no data to substantiate it? And yet, if that's what your heart is calling you to do, what we understand and know is that that heart calling then is there for a reason. We give up the ways and the means of how that's supposed to happen, and we simply let the inner inquirer within us be heard long enough. And we go on this path of fulfilling that why within us. Ernest Holmes said, the mind is the fashioning factor. The mind is the fashioning factor, and according to its range, its vision, and its positiveness will be the circumstance or the experience. He says, for example, if one sees only unloveliness in others, it is because unloveliness is a strong element in himself. The light he throws on others is generated in his own soul, and he sees them as he chooses to see them. And so in that sort of mass consciousness, if somebody says this is wrong, how many of you automatically go, this is wrong? If there's been a particular political lean within your family, how many of you just accepted that and moved in that particular direction without questioning? Years ago, I remember my oldest sister, Brenda, there was a particular politician, and she goes, I just can't understand why those people hired her, I think she said, elected her. And I said, well, tell me, I didn't have an opinion about it, but I said, tell me what it is about her that you don't like. Well, I don't know. Everybody else don't like her, so she can't be any good. And I just think that that's the echo of that cattle consciousness, right? And so he says, if one sees only unloveliness in others, it is because unloveliness is a strong element in ourselves. The light we throw on others is generated in our own soul, and we see that which we choose to see in them. So what does all this mean? It means, please, please don't stop growing. When the heat is on, the heat being the conformist pressure of the world, the heat being, but it's paradoxical in nature, actually. It's the conformist viewpoint of the world, as well as the stronger voice inside of you that is asking you to take root of that. Can't you see you've got heat in both areas? And so when the heat is on, what do you do with that? Which heat do you honor? Because if you honor the heat of the conformist, then you only pop a little. But if you honor the heat inside of you that says break free, you don't need to know how, you don't need to know why. Just be willing to break free and trust, and to begin to walk that staircase into the mist and know that everything will be handled. What if life is not then a series of random events that can be labeled as good events and bad events? What if it's not about whether you did something right or you did something wrong, but what if life, or as we would say in the science of mind, consciousness, what if consciousness is putting you in the exact situations that are needed to bring up whatever wound, story, neglect, unfinished business that is resting inside of you, resting inside the kernel of your soul. What if life does that because life is so brilliant? What if consciousness is so brilliant that it just keeps bringing up all of that stuff in the realm of a person, personality, experience? What if life does that in order for us to see the falsity of the illusion and the brokenness so that we can see the dense energy of that and believe enough within ourselves to take a different course of action? When you actually see them then in those moments, when you see those dense energies in those moments, when you notice them, they actually then begin to lose power over you. Did you hear that? So life is brilliant. Life is a conversation. Consciousness is brilliant. Consciousness is a conversation. What we know you to be at your very core is something that's absolutely holy. And so it makes perfect sense that the perfection of you, the soul part of you, will not leave you alone. And the conversation of life then keeps bringing up all of that stuff in order for you and I to once and for all let it go. Let it go. And what does letting it go mean? Letting it go is a moment-by-moment thing. Haven't you ever noticed that? Oh, I let that go years ago. Ooh, I just turned right back around and I picked it back up again. Oh, I let that go. You know, it's like perpetual luggage. Right? And so what we get to see is the power of the moment. So if you can celebrate the power of the moment, the lesson of the moment, if you can look at life and the intelligence of life and how it continues to bring up everything for you, that life is actually working. When was the last time you thought life is working for me? Well, now's the moment. Think about that. Life is working for, say that, life is working for me. Life is working for me, not against me. Life is working for me. The writer Mary O'Malley said it this way. I love it. She says, life is set up to bring up what has been bound up so it can open up, to be freed up so you can show up for life. See, I can do that too, right? Life is set up. Life is set up. What did we just determine life to be? Consciousness, good. Brilliance, genius. That which emanates from the creative intelligence that we call God. Life is set up to bring up. Life is set up to bring up what has been bound up. Everybody's got some binding going on. Life is set up to bring up what has been bound up so it can what? Open up. So it can open up, to be freed up, so you can show up for life. When the heat is on, it's the opportunity for us to open up, to be free of what has bound us, so that we can actually be present for life. Isn't it ironic that we're alive but we're not awake? There are many times when we go through things that just are not conscious. And that's the power of the moment. That's the power of community. That's the power of mirroring back to one another what is true. I wanted to leave you with a very disturbing quote. Because I like to just leave you hanging, just hanging. But in The Untethered Soul, oh my God, talking about unfinished business, talking about the pain that is there, talking about the genius of life and how life is a conversation, and life will never stop talking to you, meaning life will never stop bringing it up. And so have you ever been in relationship? Have you ever been in relationship where you've wanted the other person to do it for you? Just me, okay. Where all of that projection gets put upon the other person. It doesn't have to be an intimate relationship. It could be people in your family, the people you hang around with, your friends. But you're expecting of them. You're expecting something of them to fill you. And when you go into that with that expectation, of course, there's a lot of mess that goes on. And he says, the fact is, however, External changes are not going to solve your problem because they don't address the root of your problem. What is the root of our problem? The pain. Life is set up to bring up what has been bound up. What has been bound up inside of us, that's the root. That's the thing that's not addressed. The fact is, however, external changes are not going to solve your problem because they don't address the root of your problem. The root problem is that you don't feel whole and complete within yourself. If you don't identify, ready? If you don't identify the root properly, you will seek someone or something to cover it up. You will hide behind finances, people, fame, and adoration. If you try to find the perfect person to love and adore you, and you manage to succeed, then you have actually failed. I was like, what? Because you did not solve the problem. All you did was involve the person in your problem. I was like, what? And that is why people have so much trouble with relationships. You began with a problem inside yourself and you tried to solve it by getting involved with somebody else. On that lighthearted note, have a fabulous day. Thank you so much. No. Wow. So we go back to this understanding of our responsibility, of not doing it the way that everybody else does it, of stepping into power that perhaps for you is very scary, and perhaps you don't even have a role model. You don't have a mentor of how that even looks like. And yet all that is required is willingness. The willingness to have the conversation with life. So that when the heat is on, whatever that is for you, you don't forget. You don't acquiesce to the way in which race consciousness does things. And you hold precious that event, and you go, oh, look what has shown up for me. In order to release and to bring up something that is unfinished business inside my soul. So that I can open up to be freed up, so I can show up for life. So I ask you to close your eyes this morning and take that deep cleansing breath. It is just so amazing to be alive in this space-time continuum, in this era of consciousness, in this era of choice, to actually look at where you and I have come from, to the very seat that we're sitting in this morning, and to go, what was that journey about? How did I honor my inner inquirer and get here? How did I break free from mass consciousness to begin to honor in a more authentic and a more in-depth way the truth of my being? And what I know is I don't stop. I don't stop here. I continue. I do not stagnate. But I just continue to flow into greater and greater arenas of consciousness and awareness. What I have tasted of life up until this point is but a small degree of what is available. I am not bound by my age. I am not bound by my history. I am not bound by my economic bracket. I am not bound by the thorn, my wound, my story. But I am in a conversation. I am in a conversation that has no end, that knows no walls, that does not entertain shame, does not even entertain regret. All it is a conversation of affirmation that continues to beckon me to grow and to expand and to rise above all surface conditioning, and to know that everything is working in my favor, that life is working for me. And so in this moment, all I do is pause and breathe. Just breathe. There is such genius in us, genius in the breath, genius in the mechanics of our physical bodies, genius in what is available for us, and such deep, reverent loyalty in the way in which it will not let up. And so we welcome the heat. We welcome life. We welcome the conversation. And we pay attention now to those moments of transformation. We honor the inner inquirer within us. We keep what works. We let go of what doesn't. And we simply say yes. And as you breathe deeply in, if you are in alignment with these words, then let them anchor themselves inside of you and join me in saying, and so it is.